day, this day. I think Tim has another lung inside that hair. Since y'all are laughing, let me tell you this joke. So a man walks into a veterinarian with his Rottweiler, and he says, Doc, my dog is cross-eyed. Is there anything you could do for him? And the vet picks up the Rottweiler and looks at him, and he says, I'm going to have to put him down. And the owner goes, oh my God, because his eyes are crossed? He says, no, because he's heavy. So, I don't know how that leads into my talk, but I'll work back to it sometime. So I want to talk to you about Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi was a saint in India. He died in the 50s. As a boy, around 13, 14, 17, somewhere in there, he lies down on his uncle's office floor and contemplates where he goes after death. And somehow the contemplation was enough to carry him into a state of awakening that left him in such a blissful state that, not even knowing exactly what he was doing, he got on a train and went to southern India to a town called Tiruvannamalai, which is at the base of a mountain called Arunachala, which is supposed to be where Shiva is, Shiva the god. And he hikes up about a third of the way up, finds a cave, and lies down. Now this young man was in such bliss, he did not get up. And he just lay there in bliss. He didn't really care about anything at all, period. He was lying there. They found him. The insects were biting on him and eating it. His skin was just about to fall off because he'd just been immobile in one place. And unlike here, they did not call 911. They went, oh my God, a saint. And they could feel the presence of the divine emanating from him so strongly that they built an ashram around him. Now, not a big one, maybe about half the size, well, maybe about a quarter of the size of this room. He was there. People would come up there, and he hung out there. They brought him food, etc. And as time went by, more and more people came. They built another ashram on the other side of the ridge down on the flats, and that became the ashram that he stayed in for the rest of his life. It was a pretty simple life. He didn't do selfies. He didn't do a YouTube. He didn't write books. People wrote books about him, and sometimes they transcribed what he said. But basically, he just did the bliss. That was his job. That's a pretty good job if you get it, isn't it? I mean, just you do the bliss, we'll take care of all the rest. And so people from all over the world would come see him. The great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung said he was the brightest light in India. So he wasn't just a local phenomenon, but he became kind of an emblematic teacher around the world. And his method of teaching people to awaken was an old tradition that he more or less revived, which is kind of what we did today in meditation, which is to seek the source of your I thought. Now, if I had a whiteboard up here, I would draw a big circle and I would say, all right, this is undifferentiated consciousness. This is consciousness not broken down into particles, but just the full undifferentiated consciousness. And now if you imagine on that circle, I draw a little triangle on the edge, and that is the beginning of a separate consciousness. And the first thing that comes out of undifferentiated consciousness is the I thought. So you know this in the morning when you wake up. You wake up in the morning, you go, I am happy, I am rested, I am filled with energy, ready to go to work, I am the happiest person on earth. You do this, don't you? Right? But it always starts with the I thought. And this I thought becomes the first differentiation inside what had been a field of unified consciousness. In the field of oneness, in a field of bliss, there becomes this I thought, this separate I thought, and that then goes off to have predicates like I am happy or I am tired or whatever you happen to add to the end of it, but that becomes your beginning point of being a separate individual. Now, as I said last week, my understanding of the Course in Miracles is that the Course in Miracles states that essentially you were a light beam, more or less, in the divine sun, and you had this thought that that I'm separate from God, and that thought was such a thought that you should have laughed at, but you didn't, and therefore you believed it. Oh my gosh, now you believe that you can be separate from God, and therefore you think God must be angry with you. And if God's angry with you, He's going to punish you, and if He's going to do that, you better get to it first so you become guilty. So you start feeling guilty, and this guilt becomes your trademark. You feel guilty, but you also blame everybody else. You make them guilty as well. And so that's the Course in Miracles about forgiveness of your stupidity, about not recognizing that you're part of God, but also forgiving everyone for everything that ever happens that appears to be somehow a threat to you. It's like, forget about it. Get over it. It's not even existent. It doesn't exist except in your mind. So lighten up, right? That's Course in Miracles in 100 words or less. Right, now, so Ramana Maharshi said, now if you will follow this I thought, if you sit in meditation and you follow this I thought backward, just letting it draw you in, it will take you from outside that circle of undifferentiated consciousness back into it. And you will have that experience of oneness again. And this is your great awakening. This is how you do it. This is a methodology, that you can use. Now, my theory is that Ramana Maharshi was way out on the bell curve, right? You know, the bell curve goes up like this. Most of us are in the middle, and then there, farther out, you have rarer and rarer events. And he was pretty far on the outside that he could lie down in one day, just pick up this idea that who am I when I'm dead? And he wakes up fully and has a totally blissful experience, right? It could happen to you. Find an uncle that has a floor and give it a shot, you know, but for most of us it takes practice. It takes some practice for us to get there. So this idea of awakening to your divine nature with love, service, and personal transformation takes some practice. And so I'm going to try to lay this thought out enough that you can, if you don't have a practice for going inner, this could be it. Or you could add it to your practice if you like. Now, perhaps it would be good if we use an analogy for this before we get started. So I was watching a physicist. This physicist is a transcendental meditator. And he was essentially comparing consciousness to physics. So if you want to take it from a non-physicist, let me give you the nature of the world in short order. Essentially, there is the conventional way of seeing things. This is a Newtonian conventional way of seeing things. And it works really well for us on this level, on the size we are. That, you know, you play billiards and you hit the ball and another ball moves and it goes in the pocket, and etc. There's momentum and all that sort of stuff. That's that level. Now beneath that there's the quantum level, and at the quantum level you're down to, let's say, atoms and molecules. Beneath that is the quantum theoretical level, and there you get down into the quarks and the smaller subatomic particles. And then beneath that is the unified field. Now the unified field is the great holy grail of physics, trying to find out what is the singularity underneath it. What is the one thing that's underneath everything? Now, as you go down, things become simpler. So at the top, which is, let's say at this level, this macro level here, look how different everything is. Tons of different faces, different places, etc., etc. Lots and lots of difference. But as you go down, then you get down into the atoms and molecules. Well, there are not that many of those. Kind of just a fewer. You go down, there are fewer subatomic particles, and then down to the unified field, there's only one. Now, the latest, as I understand it, the latest theory about the unified field is that it is essentially unified. It is unbroken everywhere. But out of it bubbles strings, which are kind of like rubber bands. And they vibrate, and how they vibrate determines what type of subatomic particle they become, photon, electron, etc. That vibration, there are only so many options there, but that's how they do it. The way that little thing happens forms these subatomic particles. And you can put 1 trillion of those strings inside a proton. 1 trillion inside a proton. Well, you know how big a proton is, and so we could just do the math right here and figure out how many of those strings are in this room, right? It's like unbelievable number. Now, the peculiarity of this whole thing is that at this lower or nearly lowest level, everything is connected. So at the lowest level, there is no differentiation. At the string level, they are all connected, all of them, all those trillion inside every proton times all the atoms times all the universes, they're all connected. Now, that's a lot to hold, right? But they're sharing information and they're moving around and they all are related in some way and they never cease being related. So if that is true, you know, as you go down the thing, at the top you feel very different from everybody else, but as you move down into this, you become more one, and then as you move deeper and deeper, you become one with the one. Consciousness, we on the surface are just the same. We act, most of our macro life is act on I am doing this, right? That's how we do it. We are very much you look different than me, and you're smarter than me, and you're faster than me, and I'm better than all of you, and all that sort of thing. And you got that whole thing going on, this separate sense of self, right? You got this separate sense of self, which we have glorified to ad nauseum, right? Just get embarrassed in front of somebody, and it is nauseating. I mean ad nauseum. To the point where we suffer a lot because we live so much of the time in this separate sense of self. And as I was saying last week, it is the big lie we have been telling ourselves. Now, to get beneath that, we need love, service, and personal transformation. So you can see where service is working with the other, not service like I serve you and get paid for it, but serving like I just want you to have this. Service, you begin to break down that separateness. You begin to see the other as self on the macro level. And maybe you'll get down below it and you'll begin to feel it at the quantum level. You'll be able to feel it. And I think when we get into the power of 8 groups where you're praying for somebody, you are dropping beneath this macro level, you're dropping into this quantum level a little bit deeper. Can you see we're stepping down and we're joining our minds with the other minds that are in the room. We still have more or less a separate sense of self, but we're joining our minds in there and we're praying altruistically for someone else, which keeps us moving down toward the source. So that's why the prayer is so powerful, is because at the macro level, you don't have access to to the unified field, for sure. You're just doing the macro thing, right? You with me? When you're at the surface, you got surface power. As you go down, you get different levels of capacity. Now, this unified field, which is said to be everywhere present, even in empty space. Everywhere present, so filled with energy, so, this is physics now, so filled with energy, so powerful that a cubic centimeter of it would answer all the power problems forever. This much, that's enough. Think of that. That means there's a lot going on that we never see, which you probably guessed somewhere in your life. That is, if you've ever tried to understand another human being, there's a lot more there than you've ever you see. But deeper than that, the question is, what is this? Which has driven the physics into a deeper and deeper understanding, has come up with the idea that the energy is so abundant that interacting of the fields that come off this unified field is what causes all the stuff you see, electromagnetism, gravity, etc., etc. It is the interaction of that they think might actually be the cause of the appearance of matter being in a steady state that draws its energy from someplace else. It's quite above my pay grade, but I gotta say, the net of it is the power, this unbelievable power exists at the deepest level. And it is everywhere present. And you are an outcropping of that. And I think the closer you get to it, the more power you have access to. As you may know or may not know, which is that space travel, infinite space going, one of the ways they're trying to figure out how to do space travel is how to tap into this to the unified field and draw energy from that. Because they can't carry enough rocket fuel to do all they would want to do, right? So they need some big power source that doesn't have a lot of mass. There it is. But how to get to it, that's the secret. And I think it's also true with our consciousness. There's this big power source underneath, and I don't think these are altogether dissimilar, even though it's an analogy. I don't think they're completely dissimilar. There's a big power source underneath us that supports all of existence, that holds the whole mechanism in place, that is constantly exuding the energy it takes for this to be as it is. And the habits of the way we are here at the top which is quite individual and separated and kind of weak, really, if you say, that does not describe the whole of it, nor all that is possible. And so as you move into deeper levels of being, you move into more primary ways of relating. The sense of separateness begins to drop. The sense of powerlessness begins to drop. The ability to know stuff at a distance begins to arise. And the power to be the miracle maker arises, and the ability to be at bliss and one with the one lands. And to get to your divine nature, if you're not on the bell curve way out here, you got to learn to meditate and pray, or you're going to be stuck at the macro, maybe slightly lower, but you're going to be stuck without it. This is your method for taking yourself deeper. Now, coming back to Ramana Maharshi's method of meditation. If you think about it, undifferentiated consciousness could be this unified field down here. And the I thought is that first beginning of creative qualification of that energy into something in particular. And it starts with the I, and it could be like you become the little string that's vibrating a certain way, and then it kind of works its way up, and the I becomes manifest as you. And so Charles Fillmore, who was one of the co-founders of Unity, well, long before this was all worked out, said that if you will declare a thing from the I am, you will become it, and it will become evidence. Which he's tapping into this knowing that mystics have had for a long time, that essentially you are not what you appear to be, but you can touch in with the divine, and you can have the experience of being at one with the source. It is possible. It may not be likely. You may be on the extreme edge of the bell curve. You may not have it the first time you try it, but maybe with practice you can, and you go and you learn this to declare who you are and to go deeper and deeper through meditation. And that's kind of like, okay, so some people have said to me, you know, I like traditional unity more than I like what you say. And and I try to say that essentially what unity was saying was cutting edge at the time, but what we're trying to do now is to go deeper. We're trying to become more than just successful. We want to be awakened. We want to be blissed. We want to be at one with the source, and we want to do great things, not just adequate things. And so to do that, we're going to leave the traditional text a little bit. They're never wrong. They're not false. We're just going to add to them another way of doing it. Y'all with me on that? Let me go back to the meditation. Now, see, here's the practice of meditation. So what you do is you're looking for the undifferentiated consciousness. You're looking for that blissful state, for that stillness, for the silence, as Charles Fillmore would call it. He was fond of going there. The silence. You go into the silence. And how do you get there? Many ways, but let me just give you Ramana Maharshi's way. Ramana Maharshi says, sit there and ask yourself this question: who's having this experience? And the experience could be anything. It could be a happy day, a bad day. It could be that you are energized or you're tired. It doesn't matter. The question is, who's having the experience? So most of us spend our days worrying about the experience, but this is about asking, who is having the experience? And when you do that, you start to head down the rabbit hole. You go from the macro and you start moving down to the quantum level, or whatever metaphor you'd like, but you start moving inward and you say, who's having it? You say, I am. Well, now, where is I am? It's right on top of the undifferentiated consciousness. It's really close. You're closer than you ever knew. Took the shortcut. Ramana Maharshi used to say, it's the fastest way to get there. Okay, so here we are. Who's having this experience? All together now? I am. And where is that? Just the triangle on top of the undifferentiated consciousness. Now, from there to the undifferentiated consciousness is the practice of efforting without effort. This is tricky. This is where meditation is tricky, is because you must apply the right amount of effort, and you also must relax deeply. Because if you try too hard, you won't get there. The I is working too hard to dissolve. But the I must be pointed in the direction of the undifferentiated consciousness, or it will not know which way to go. It'll go back out and start talking to itself about what it's got to do today. Right? So you point it back at the undifferentiated consciousness and you say, from where did you come? And you just ask that question, and perhaps you use the I as the mantra, but not like I'm going to get it, I'm going to figure this out, because figuring it out is over here. Can't be done from figuring it out. There's no answer, that's over there. The experience of going inward is the answer. So all you do is you just fall into it by asking, who am I? And then you hope you go down into it. Now, you cannot make it happen. This is why grace is important. Grace, kindness, love of the divine coming to you somehow, pulling you back into it, because you just can't break out of your own orbit without it. The harder you try, the more you get stuck. But you got to try, but not not. I took a lesson from the Tibetan tradition on meditation, and they have this method of doing meditation which is fantastically cool. They start with intense concentration. So you know how we watch our breath here. They say, you watch your breath and don't let your mind wander for 5 minutes. That's a trick. I mean, how many of us just sit down and can do that? Most of us wander. But the idea of intense concentration brings your mind to the brink of something. You get right to the edge. You're pressing, attention, breath, whatever you... And then you go, relax. And what happens is it goes, wham, like that. So you might want to try that with this. You just, what am I doing? Who am I? Who am I? And you're paying attention. You're giving it your all. Give it your all. When you kind of got a steady state on that, who am I? Who am I? And then your mind's not wandering off. Then relax. And see if you won't fall into the awareness. Right? You with me on that? That's a very cool technique, isn't it? It's like when you push against the door and you push and you push and you push and you just, it's stuck, you know? And you're pushing and then you go, pop, and it goes, wing, right? That's how we're doing it. Okay? What else do you need to know about this? So, one of the things that Ramana Maharshi would say is that you have to be in your heart. So everything I've said today sounds like you're in your head. But Ramana Maharshi would say you have to be in your heart. And he used to say, when anyone says, who are you? You go, I'm here, right? I did it. You don't go, I did it, right? It's here. And he even said that the soul is connected to this part of your body. That's where the soul connects to the body. But if you move out of your head and into your heart before you ever do this meditation, so that you take some time before, just to get started. You don't even ask, who am I? Or who's having this experience? First, move into your heart. Just settle down, move into your heart, and breathe into and out of the heart. Now, we do this almost every week here, so you should be familiar with this idea. You breathe into the heart, you hang out in the heart, you shift your some of the energy that's up in your head down into your heart. You let it drop down into the heart, and the heart begins to open. Then if you do the meditation from an open-hearted space, and you say, who's having this experience? It's not like a thought process, it's I am. Right? I am. And then the exploration inward is more whole, unified, etc. So you move in from I am to who's having this experience. I, right? Carrying it deeper and deeper. Right? Okay. And at some point, relax. I see people sleeping already, so it works. Okay. Let's practice. Let's move into the heart for a minute. Let your breath be in the center of the chest. Be focused there anyway. Let your breath be focused in the center of the chest. Image, sense, and feel the center of the chest or the heart organ, one or the other. Breathe into it, make it your focus. And now as the heart begins to open, you might use this image of opening the heart by imagining the heart or the heart chakra as a bud of a rose, that with each breath one petal opens and it becomes full bloomed as you breathe. Open a little further. And now inside this place where your heart's centered, now ask the question, who's having the experience that you're having right now, whatever it is? As you ask that question, then the obvious answer is I am. So now you know what you're looking for. I am. Just feel I am. Just feel it. Practice being the I am at this moment. If your day is bad or your times are troubled, you might just sit in the middle here and go no further and just ask the question, who am I? Who's having this experience? And just stick with that I am. And stick with the I am until you're at peace again. Hang out until in the I am state until you're ready. This is uncoupling all the events from who you really are. So now, if you're ready, if you're at peace, and you're still in your heart, you may explore the next level with, from where did this I am come? What is its source? Ramana Maharshi's way of saying it is, who am I? Or what am I? You follow that, bring your attention to I, and go deeper.